the one that mentored me in this position. So he'll be a great addition to the UETN board. We also have Jennifer Covington, and she is not on yet either. She is taking the place of Taryn, and Taryn was down in the Moab area where, you know, life is great. I would love to live down there. But we now have Jennifer Covington, and she is the superintendent in Murray School District. She has done amazing things, and we've actually showcased some of those things, especially during the pandemic and what they were doing with wireless and providing access and internet for students in Murray School District. So having her on here really brings another set of expertise, you know, boots on the ground in that area as well. And then there's Patty Norman, me, and I was reappointed. So welcome me again. So here we go. Here we go. Yeah. So there's one vacancy on the board still that represents telehealth, and I think that they're still in the process of this. Is that correct?
Yes, still working on that one.
Still working on that one. Okay. So just a welcome to them when they come on, and if you see them out and about, let them know how great this is. And I think a lot of our board members, first question they have is from a mentoring perspective, like, what is my role? Like, why am I on here? What is it that I do? And so really appreciate the work that we've done with Elwood over the past year in redefining what that onboarding looks like, the bylaws and whatnot, so that there's a better understanding of when you come on, that every single voice that you see, all the little squares around this table, is important, and they were selected for a very important reason. You're speaking on behalf of several people, and you're bringing to the table the ideas and the challenges, struggles, stumbling blocks of everyone that you represent. And so appreciate your voice around the table and the time that you take to do this as a commitment as well. So our first action item today is to look at the board minutes. And so I hope all of you have had time to review those minutes from the June 14th meeting. And so I'm looking for a motion.
I move approval.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second. We have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed say nay. It's unanimous. So we will move on to our second agenda item, which is board elections. And this is something that we can do as a single motion or separate motions for chair and vice chair. The motion needs to include the length of time, the term as chair and vice chair, and the remainder of their term of 4 years, whatever's in the motion. So there's some complexity involved with this piece as well. If you would like to run, and you can ask a different board member to lead the vote if you'd prefer. And I just want to say, Spencer, Laura, how long have I done this? I've done this for a long time, and it is time. And I've talked with folks, Robert Wagner and I, when we were meeting with Elwood and moving forward, to be able to give others this same opportunity. And it is a great experience, being a chair and a vice chair, being able to advocate on behalf of everyone that you see here, and being intricately involved. I have to say how wonderful it is. So I'm advertising these positions right now. So what I'm doing is I'm doing my little promo advertisement to say you want this position. The staff at UETN, the leadership is phenomenal in preparing and getting you ready and going through the agenda and making sure that you're prepared. So all of this that you see that looks like I'm super prepared, it's because other folks got me to this point, so that I could be able to facilitate this meeting on your behalf. And then working as the chair and the vice chair, you really get to see different perspectives and needs across the board of UETN. So it's not something that when you come that you stand alone, and you have such a great support system in moving forward in those areas. So do we want to have Spencer, do you want to kind of go over some of this area with the voting on or asking for nominations? Do I need to?
Sure. Do you want me to solicit nominations?
Yep, that would be great.
Oh, okay. You'll notice, and Patty, well said, and also thank you for your continued service there. It is a long set of years, but really appreciate the knowledge you bring, and that's a strong plug, I guess. So I'm not sure where these elections will go, Patty, but there was something signaled there, I guess. So thank you. But you'll notice in the agenda, the state code it's fairly simple, and there's a little bit in the bylaws that gives a little bit of structure to this. The term for these is up to the board. There's no set term, correct? And Laura's kind of the backup here to make sure I don't get off the rails here. But the chair and vice chair, they are the ones that we work with as staff to set the agenda for the board. These recent changes with committees, the policy committee and the finance committee specifically, will hope provide some additional information in structuring those agendas that we hope will inform the chair and vice chair going forward. But with that, I guess we'll go down this road. Let's start with the chair, if that's okay, Patty. Are there any nominations for the chair?
I'm going to raise I've got to find how I raise my hand as a host. I can't. But I'll just say, I would like to nominate Jason Straight as chair.
Okay.
And I would like to second that.
Okay, Jason Straight.
I'd like to nominate Christina Bond, UVU, as chair.
I will second that.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Hearing none. Let's do it this way. We'll do a count individually for each nominee. We'll start with Jason. Those who are in favor of Jason as chair, raise your hand or wave your hand as best you can for a few minutes or a few seconds so Denise can get that count.
Okay.
Did you see, is that 4?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And then for Christina Baum, those who are in favor of Christina as chair, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay. You got 5 for that. Okay, so it appears Christina Baum has been voted as chair. Congratulations, Christina.
Thank you.
And thank you for the nominees. Let's do the vice chair. Any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Jason Straight.
I'll second that again.
Okay. Any other nominees? Okay, well, let's let that go by acclamation. Anyone well, that by nomination, let's go ahead and take that to a vote. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Okay. If it's not unanimous, we'll take it as unanimous. Well, wonderful. Thank you and congratulations, Christina and Jason. Thank you. Hopefully you're willing to do this. If not, you can certainly
Speak now.
back out now. But if I can just add one more thanks to Patty. She has been an incredible in the 2 years time I've been in this role. I really appreciate Patty. I look up to Patty as a mentor that predates me in this role. The years I've been able to work with her. I'm glad you were reappointed, Patty. I'm still going to turn to you for a resource, and I hope you'll sound off to us as needed as well. I really value our relationship professionally for the many years. It's helped me in a lot of areas. So thank you. And during this time of transition, I know you're incredibly busy, and the time you put in on our behalf. Thank you very much for doing that for me.
Well, I've loved it. And I remember the day Steve Hess was actually the one that nominated me. I don't know if you remember that, Steve, back in the day. I think it was my very first meeting that I went to for UETN. And I went to my first meeting and then was nominated as the vice chair. And I was like, hold on, what is this all about? and so I want to express my gratitude and appreciation because Steve, that really has helped me grow. And so thank you for having that confidence after meeting me for 5 minutes. So here we are.
Well, I knew what you'd done at the Davis School District before you got to the States, so
Oh, there we go.
your
There we go.
reputation preceded you.
There we go. Sometimes that's not always good, but thank you. There we go. So let's go ahead and we'll get to our next agenda item. So our third agenda item. Let's
Do you
see.
need to specify a term of office?
Oh, specify a term of office.
Yeah, if and this is up to the board, and so certainly I think similarly, if there are nominating terms, thanks Jared for the reminder, by the way. I think most typically it has been traditionally it has been a 2-year term, but certainly it's up to the board. So with that, Jared, thank you for the reminder. Any nominating terms? Yes.
I move that we make them 2-year terms.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Any other suggested terms or nominations for a term? Okay, well, let's put that to a vote to formalize it. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it appears unanimous, Denise. So thank you, Jared, for the reminder. So 2 years, we'll note that, and in 2 years' time, we'll revisit these appointments. So again, thank you.
All right.
With that, oh, go ahead, Patty.
Yep. So I'm going to move to the next item on our agenda, and that is some advisory council changes. And Jason Straight will be presenting. Our new vice chair, Jason Straight, will be presenting, and this also can be separate motions as well. So Jason?
Thanks, Chair Norman. The policy committee would like to put forward for the board consideration, and this is from the Telehealth Advisory Council, that Tiffany Vickers and Sammy Bichelle be appointed to the Telehealth Advisory Council. Tiffany is an assistant professor at Utah Tech University, and let's see, Sammy is a school nurse consultant with the Utah Department of Health and Human Services. I would make a motion that we accept these recommendations from the Telehealth Advisory Council.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So all those in favor of the motion to accept nominations, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The voting is unanimous and the motion passes. So congratulations.
And then from the Education Advisory Council, there's a list that's below. They have requested approval of their revised structure. The new structure reduces the council membership by half, but we still stay in statutory requirements of who needs to be on that council. And as the policy committee worked with the Education Council, Chairs Rick Gaisford and Leslie Baker, this is the recommendation that we came up with. From K-12, we would have 5. From higher ed, we would have 5, and then we listed 3 others. And I guess they're affiliate organizations that would make that recommendation to make up the Education Advisory Council. I would put forward a motion that we accept And I would make a motion that we accept this recommendation from the Education Advisory Council in the recommended list that is listed below.
We have a motion. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in the favor of accepting these recommendations, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Jason. We also have some staffing as well, and we have Christina Baum, our new chair, who will presenting this area. Christina?
Wonderful. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Well, first, there's some staffing considerations for UETN. I'm going to jump to the security one. You can see that one's TBD, but for the security piece, this is additional 400,000, and it's for a few positions to help with security assessment for the tech colleges. For those who, if you're not aware, higher education does a really fantastic thing that I believe Steve Hess and others helped introduce, which is kind of round robin across the schools to help each other with security penetration testing and identifying where there's weaknesses and helping strengthen our systems. So this would be to extend that through UETN to help the tech colleges and K-12 to be able to have that same type of service. The next piece is for Nearpod, and that helps teachers to make classes more interactive. It's used mostly in K-12. I'm not aware of any in higher education, but I could maybe just not be aware of it. This is a 5-year contract at $2 million per year without uplift during that term. This was paid previously with CARES funding, and so this would be a request for additional ongoing funding. The next piece is for Kaltura. That's for 500,000 ongoing. This is used in K-12 as well as higher education. It's our lecture capture, and it's deeply integrated with Canvas. And again, it was previously CARES funded, and so this is seeking for ongoing funding. And then there's Zoom for public and for higher ed. For K-12, that would be for about 15,000 licenses for $1 million annually. And for higher ed, that would be for 45,000 licenses. So about 3x that cost at $3 million annually. This is one that is broadly used, and we'd want to move down that path. Then the last piece, and Patty, please jump in if there's any pieces here that I need to cover more. This is for Scribble software. The proposal I read through was for grades 3 through 12, was my understanding, for 950,000 ongoing. This is a research and writing platform that helps students and teachers to be able to better organize their writing by annotating and citing within the platform. It had been funded, it sounds like, for 3 years, for 2020 through 2023. And then it received funding for the 2024 school year, and the contract's been approved for 2025. And so again, this is seeking 950,000 for ongoing funding for Scribble. It sounds like the usage has been going up from students there. So Patty, anything else you wanted to add to that one?
No, that's great. Christina, can you maybe talk about what the tipping point is? And I'm not sure if you have all of that between something being approved to be state funded or having UETN be the one who decides that, yes, this is something that will go through UETN in that rubric of making those decisions, maybe to help everyone.
And I'll do the best I can, jump in and help you guys. I'm still learning. So my understanding is that as we take things, there's different routes for funding, right? We can go to the Board of Higher Education, and that can then be through the education group, or we can come through UETN. Either way, those requests come to the legislature, right, as fiscal requests. And so I think this is asking that these come through UETN. And some of the history there for Scribble in particular was documented very well to explain the routes they've taken previously for funding. So this is seeking to come through UETN to request funding. You can see the history for context that it had been funded previously by the Board for Higher Education. Is that answering your question there, Patty?
Yeah, I think that answers the question. Any discussion? Are you bringing this forward as a motion for consideration for legislative funding requests? Are there any questions about it before we bring forward any motions? Jared?
Yes, I have a question. Oh,
Oh, sorry. No, two questions. One is I'm looking at the numbers there and wondering if the total is 6.9 million or.
Yeah, I believe the scribble total was not added into the total in the
Ah.
board meeting notes there. And so if you open up the scribble proposal, you'll see the 950,000, but would be in addition to the amount listed there.
Okay, and then my second question was, I'm just curious if the finance committee had any concerns about any of these, or if there were other things that were considered that were not brought forward.
Yeah, and maybe Kurt, I can turn some time to you as well.
Yeah, so Jared, actually the math is wrong on that first line that says total proposal request. Jared's right, it should be 6.9 million. You got 2 and 1 is 3 and 3 is 6 and 5 is 6.5 plus the 400 is 6.9 before you get to the scribble, right? If I'm got that right. So thank you, Jared, for catching that. We met as a finance committee meeting and went over some of these things. And so I would support pushing these through legislative, but just get the total number right.
So to clarify, Kurt, the 6.9 does not include the scribble, but that would then be increased if the board decides to also add scribble to that total.
That is what I'm seeing on the individual items added together. Yes.
Thank you. Jason?
Yes, I think I'm not sure who to direct this question to. I have two. Is the streaming video platform, the Kaltura, is that replacing the Cisco for IVC, or is that something on top of the IVC that has typically been used? And then my second question is dealing with video conferencing. Will UETN still be entering into contracts with WebEx, or will there be a move from WebEx to Zoom in the priority structure?
Good questions.
No,
Yeah, go ahead.
okay, I'll take the first one or the second one first because that's a little more straightforward. We will continue with the WebEx because it's actually extremely affordable. The utilization just isn't there, however. So to keep it as a primary IVC platform is the team will likely move away from that. In fact, you'll remember a couple of years ago, we received state funding for a platform or a tool that integrates the different video conferencing platforms, so like Teams and Zoom and others. And so WebEx will continue as an option, at least for the time being. But this Zoom is basically a request, much like Nearpod, for UETN. This was funded off CARES funding. It's coming off that contract that's up next year. Several of the higher ed institutions, similarly, on an individual basis, their licenses are either up or they're coming due. And so this is an effort to pursue a statewide license for all of public and higher education based on the current utilization. So on Kaltura, just real quick.
Sorry to jump in. You know, Utah State is one of the biggest users of Kaltura. I was wondering maybe if board member Holly wants to describe if that's okay.
Sure. Kaltura is used extensively as an affordable, long-term, highly integratable platform for storing video, largely used for classroom, long-term classroom lecture capture. Of course, Zoom recordings and cloud-based recordings exist, but those are used for short-term storage. They expire after a period of time. And so Kaltura remains the system of record for long-term video archiving and storage. Laura, is that reflective? Is that what you were asking for?
Thank you.
And just to further clarify, Kaltura is not a video conferencing platform.
Video storage, yeah.
Yeah.
So often, for example, Zoom may produce a recording, but we will actually store that recording in Kaltura long term because the costs to maintain that recording in the Zoom cloud are prohibitively expensive, or at least have been.
No, they are, and that's not something I would ever recommend, is using Zoom's cloud service for storage. So that answers my question on the platform. That this really, it's not a platform, it's a storage capacity tool. Okay,
That's compatible with any platform, any type of video recording. That's right. It's vendor agnostic in that sense.
awesome. Thank you for the clarification.
Hey, David, and I apologize. I was supposed to ask for a motion and the discussion to the motion. So I think Christina, was that a motion you were bringing forward?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, that was a motion. Okay, and then discussion to that motion. Okay, thank you. So Dave? Oh, you're on mute.
Just a couple questions. With the clarification, I'm just curious if we've looked into who's using other solutions in school districts, for example. I know we have a video storage that our region has adopted, so there's several school districts involved in something else. So a little concerned that we're not getting the word out that this is provided through UEN and others are adding costs because they could be doing it through UEN. And then just the idea of how we're communicating out when we've hit a threshold that this particular item should be for purchase generally for the state through UEN or USBE. I think there's not a uniform way to do that, but I'm curious how we're coming up with the way to do that and deciding on how to get that word out and get the buy-in that way. It seems to be prohibitive in the amount of costs we're paying for something versus the amount of use that we're getting out of something. And I'd just like there to be a more straightforward way for us to decide how that all works, especially in a year that we're going to the legislature with replacement costs for a lot of things from CARES and that AIRS funding that came through. I think we're going to really have to have our A game together on how we're approaching this and why we would take on these costs.
And Dave, you bring up a really good point on doing a statewide rate or doing paying for it across the state. And I think that is something that when we look at a rubric side, statewide, I know that it's more, I think a common, correct me if I'm wrong, a common use statement is more than 50% of the state, or I can't remember what it was. If someone can help me out on that, be able to make that determination, and then it goes into the common usage. Is that right? There's another word that's in there as well.
Now, just to piggyback off of what board member just said, in the Q's region, we've also put in a 40 terabyte server for storage within our region. And is this meant to be just for IVC storage, video storage? Or can it be used K-12 also for their storage of their courses that we're teaching for endorsement courses and those types of things? So maybe a clarification, is this just a higher ed ask, or is this for K-16?
Right now, Kaltura is licensed just for higher ed. We do have a couple school districts that I think Park City School District is using it. It's available if the school districts are able to pay for it themselves. There isn't ongoing funding for it. And it's a really part of the big infrastructure for higher education tied with Canvas. So in addition to storage, it also encodes video in multiple platforms and formats so that it can be used for mobile devices and things like that. So it's kind of built into the back-end infrastructure of Canvas and Zoom together.
So I guess one question I would have with this, is this a service that then UETN could run, and then the universities, just like us, we pay for that service? I just looked that we sat in a meeting with some legislators last week, and we've been told that there's not going to be much money, and that our asks to the legislature need to be very pinpoint on moving forward. And they specifically told us in the meeting that if we come with asks that are extending things that we purchased with ESSER funds as institutions, or those that the legislature is not going to consider funding those. So I guess that's kind of one of my questions is, do we need to do an analysis of which ones we really want to focus on to have a better chance of getting our request approved?
Jason, this is a really good conversation because it all comes down to prioritization. And I think that is a very appropriate discussion for us to have as board members. I know in K-12 education, some of our entities, JLC, whatnot, have come up with either one or at most 5 that they're asking for. And if we look at these and, prioritize efforts, yes, we can collapse things by saying software. We're asking for, software or whatever in this amount. Yeah, we're asking for staffing in this amount. And so maybe this looks like 2 requests. Is that correct? Let me see if we put it forward that way, it could almost be 2 requests, one in one area and one in the other. And maybe that's how we put it out is with the 2 requests and then the information below it. And sometimes that then goes to people looking at which ones are, if we are these prioritized within this request as well. If we asked for software and then all of a sudden they gave us $3 million and they said, yes, we'll grant it at $3 million, then what is the decision that the board makes? Is the decision then to say, okay, then which of these would we fund for $3 million? Or would they say, yes, we're funding this program and this program, but not these? And so maybe that's a discussion item for the board as well. Any thoughts on that?
I like the idea of breaking it into the software and the staffing options, and then having a prioritized list within software, right? So we can identify that. I think the relative priorities, it may be good to look at usage, kind of following Jason's thinking to say how many, what percentage maybe is using that to say we're going to get the greatest good out of this funding.
I think also we need to look at too is risk management mitigation. You look at the ask for the 400,000 for security assessments. I'm at Davis Tech, and in 2016 we had a security assessment done by UETN, Jim Stewart and his crew. But anyway, at that time they suggested that we hire a security engineer, which we were able to do. But I'm pretty sure that at the rest of the tech colleges, there's no security engineer there. And you look at the risk that can be, any ransomware, any kind of anything that would happen as far as security, that could be, millions of dollars. So from a risk perspective, I think that needs to be a high priority.
Thank you, Greg. Any other discussion on that?
I would weigh in and say from a legislative willingness perspective to think about this is a somewhat overused term, but shared services in that sense, meaning where can we deduplicate, where can we standardize, where can we be using more common tools in more common ways, might be a focus of this as far as prioritization and maximizing funding. Where we're funding a single tool that may be used in an area here or an area here will be maybe less powerful of a message than us coming together and say, look, we see common processes and a common tool that would meet this need overall. Maybe something worth discussing.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up as well. And this isn't a bird walk, it's going to seem like it for a second, but I think that it's really important to discussion. When I looked over the list myself, I know that UETN just did a fabulous job of issuing and taking an RFP through with AI, and we got it done to those 3 licenses, Skillstruck, Power AI, and School AI or Magic. What was the third one?
Skillstruck, Magic School, and School AI. You're right.
Magic School. Okay, and each of those, collectively, we're looking at about $3 to $4 per license, and that's a licensing structure where there's a state rate now. And as I was looking at all of the risk, Eric, all of you, in this conversation, I was looking at the risk, creating a walled garden for students and teachers, and being able to have that capacity to, with cybersecurity, and that capacity to make sure that we're not giving out data and information, and creating some easy entry point because a teacher's using ChatGPT or a student is, putting the work in, and what that looks like. I mean, that's really high risk. And so my mind for a minute went to the fact, well, maybe we should take, I think it was how much statewide, it would be about, what, 1.8 million if you were to take 4 times 600,000 or whatever, 240, I don't know. My math is not really good this morning, but if we were to take that cost, that's a high risk cost when we're talking about AI, because it really does lead into some of those high risk categories. And as we're looking at this area, maybe that is one of the determining factors as we make this prioritized list. Is we look at risk throughout the state. We look at, and that's everybody, that's everyone on this call, because we're all impacted by that risk, because then if someone has to pay out for whatever that, we all absorb that cost in one way or another. So what does that look like? And then what does it look like to achieve our goals? I went back to our mission and vision statement, and everything we ask for should be funding our goals. And so as I look at funding our goals, our mission statement, going along with it, is this funding our goals and getting us to the end of the row? And that's why I would, if we were doing a prioritized list, my number one in here would be the staffing, because the staffing is what makes it happen. And I would put that as our number one priority. And then moving down the list, maybe for some consideration. I would almost, at some point, not right now because it's still new, I'm not sure where that would fit. At some point, we may have to have a statewide funding source for AI, or a solution once it becomes embedded within, just because of the risk of folks choosing not to, even though there's a statewide license. That choice might bring them individual risk to their LEA because they can't afford a $3 or $4 license per student. So those are some things that are future forward facing as well. But I opened this conversation about how we as a board are determining what that prioritized list is, or do we put it forward? Jason, you mentioned legislature. There's not a lot of funding this year. So any year, I would say there's not been a year where they're like, you know what, ask for whatever you want, you're going to get it. I don't know. And I'm going to maybe call on Dr. Rich Nye, because he's now joined us. And Dr. Nye, we gave you a great welcoming speech, introduced you, let them know that you're the one who mentored me for this position. I don't know if you have any advice, information, or background from the legislative point, because you've been in the office for not even a month. So we're sure you're coming with all of the answers to help us guide this along.
All the answers. Thanks, Dr. Norman. I appreciate that. No, I think the discussion's spot on. You're identifying some very specific items that are of prioritization. I do appreciate, and I'm sure the legislature does as well, as many of you have worked with them in various capacities, but the more specificity you can put behind it, and I know USB talks a lot about creating a business case and behind, which essentially gives the why behind the what, and then that's the only thing that I would also just double down on, or what are those metrics that are identifying the need, and how are we articulating that need with a compelling narrative. So it's the right conversation. Thanks, Patty.
Thank you.
Patty, I just have a question or a comment. So for our hospital, we're working on a grant through the Utah Cyber Center, and it seemed like it was a statewide grant for Sentinel-1. I'm just curious if there is a statewide platform, and if the legislature is going to say, well, let's all get on the same platform. Has anybody else besides me heard of the Utah Cyber Center and the Sentinel-1 grant? So,
Has anyone?
Yeah, I can just give a little bit of background, Kurt, if that's okay.
Sure.
So the Cyber Center, they're based out of the Department of Public Safety of the state, and they are pursuing, they have a federal grant through Department of Homeland Security. And so from that grant, they're pursuing a license for Sentinel-1, which is a managed detection response tool for security. That license they're pursuing is for government entities only. You'll recall last year, we actually did have a pretty sizable request. Included in that was to get a managed detection tool for all of public and higher education. That wasn't funded. Our approach this year is to maybe trim that and be maybe a little more focused on the assessment and testing piece, at least to help inform the tech colleges and to some extent more of our K-12 partners, similarly to how the degree granting USHE institutions have done with their testing, where many of them do have those platforms now because of the recommendations of those tests. So that's kind of a long-winded way of saying we've scaled back to that 400,000, feeling like that's a more pressing priority than to go straight to the tools themselves at this point.
Thank you.
So I'm wondering, so I'm looking back at the list, and the motion is to move this forward. We still have a TBD with the salary piece that goes right there. We do have risk with 400,000 piece. If we're determining risk on all of these, because that's a prioritization, and do we want to move forward in this way? Do we want to prioritize this list to be able to say, if we had to prioritize and we only got a certain amount of money, we would fund this first, the second? How would that go? Christina.
So a thought, kind of combining the thoughts there. I think if we start with risk, and then if we move to the shared services idea that Eric suggested, right, where we're taking a look at where we're going to get the most usage, and be able to demonstrate to the legislature that we are hearing you when you request that we do more shared services. I think that would be a pretty sound approach.
Okay, with that in mind, would we want to do one of two things? I mean, there's things that we can do. We can send this back to committee and have them look this over and really look at prioritization, ask for some business cases to back it up with a business case model. That's what we do at USBE. It's like, here's the, how, what, why, all of that. And it's similar to what you'll see with that scribble request. And so would we want to do that and have it come back? I know our next meeting, I think, is actually too late. Isn't that right? It's in October. That would almost be too late, isn't it?
It is, but Patty, that's probably something we could do when we start working with the governor's office later this month on our request. If just hypothetically, I don't want to push things too much in one direction, but if this list of software is something the board is comfortable with, we could at least convey that's the list we have, but then that could be reprioritized at an upcoming meeting, assuming those amounts stay the same, but it's just a reordering of that software based on those business cases.
Would it be a good thought maybe for the board just to authorize the administrative team to go forward with this list to legislative, and then anywhere within this list, scale it down and prioritize as needed to get the legislative approval? So in other words, we'll approve the whole thing with administrative decision-making to scale back as needed.
So Kurt, are you giving an amendment to the motion?
Yeah, I guess I would amend the motion that we approve the full list and give the administrative team permission to scale back as needed to get legislative approval.
Okay, so we have an amendment motion as stated, and I'm wondering if we can have that motion read.
Well, okay.
I was going to try and state it, but Kurt, you were great, and my memory wasn't as great. So
that's okay. So Christina made the motion to approve the budget as presented. Kurt made the amendment to give the administrative team at UETN the approval to scale back as needed for legislative approval.
Okay, okay. Any discussion of that amendment?
With the correction of the sums.
Yes.
Yes.
With the correction of the what?
The 6.9, not 5.9.
Right, 6.9.
And is that, to go back just to make sure, clarifying the original motion, does that include the Scribble license?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Okay.
so it'd actually be 7.85.
Correct.
Right.
Could we ask, and I know this isn't part of a motion, but it's direction to staff to have the business cases in backup so that we have the full information for each of those areas so that we can look at that further.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. All right,
I
so we have
second the
that.
motion. If you're
Okay, we
asking
have-
for a second.
There we go. We have a motion and a second to the amended, an amendment to the motion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Okay, that takes us back to the original motion as amended. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. That amended motion is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, great discussion. Appreciate it. Moving on, we have some discussion items, and the first one is the accessible websites and apps, and we have Christopher Phillips who's going to present on this. Christopher.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the chance to be here today and to share a little bit about digital accessibility. And want to start by just acknowledging Laura Hunter and Katie Garrett from UETN have just been really helpful in putting some of this content together and helping with this conversation. And I just want to start off with a quick introduction to what digital accessibility is. A lot of us are familiar with students with disabilities in K-12 and in higher education. And we're really just talking about or other members of the public, parents or visitors with disabilities. Can they acquire the same information and basically have the same types of experiences as people without disabilities? And I think a lot of us, when we think about disability and education, we're looking at special education offices or disability resource centers. And those groups do an incredible job of kind of working with individual students to provide specific accommodations. And we want to acknowledge, and that work is incredibly important. But then this is something different where we're looking at kind of all of our digital experiences and looking at what can we do to make sure those websites, those course materials, those online videos are accessible and usable for people with disabilities. And as we've kind of done some work in looking at this across different Utah schools, whether we're looking at websites or our YouTube channels and videos or course content, just acknowledging that right now there are significant barriers for students with disabilities across the gamut, from K-12 to higher ed. It just is a problem. And again, these special ed and disability offices, their work is largely focused on working with individual students to overcome these barriers. But this is kind of taking a different look at it to see what can we do to create accessible, inclusive, universally designed experiences for all students so they don't have these barriers from the beginning. And with this, just want to acknowledge that there's a real legal risk around this. Besides of course, we want all students to be able to succeed and to feel included in our classrooms, but also there's a risk management issue here. And just the risk and the growth in digital accessibility especially has been growing year over year. Well, in fact, one thing I'll throw this in the chat, but I just took a look this morning. It's not just a theoretical risk, but just this is a link in the chat you can see here. These are complaints through the Office of Civil Rights, specifically around digital accessibility. Since 2016, there's been 12 of these, mostly in the K-12 space, where a website or course material hasn't been accessible, and the Office of Civil Rights works with something. And when these legal agreements happen or issues happen, they can be really disruptive, and not to mention expensive as well. Steve, if you're on too, I know you mentioned the other day in our advisory committee a colleague at Colorado. Is that something you could chime in on, just as a maybe Steve's not with us here.
He had to leave us.
Leave out.
He was-
Okay. He mentioned
Yeah, sorry.
a colleague at Colorado had a complaint, $4 million. A lot of other, universities have kind of seen similar types of things that have happened. And I guess with this, there's always been kind of requirements around this, but there are some new legal requirements that have just recently, just in April of this year, that came out from the Department of Justice. And I'll again share a link in the chat, but there are some new requirements around digital accessibility specifically that apply to K-12 and higher education that put in place some new requirements around this with a specific deadline. We have a little bit of time until April of 2026. But what those requirements are going to demand is that all digital experiences need to be compliant to a certain level. It's a technical requirement, WCAG 2.1, that's probably not worth going into, but it means that whether it's our websites or our course content, third-party software, documents, I mean, we consider everything that we do in the digital space, taking steps to make sure that those work for students with disabilities. And when they don't, again, that risk with these new requirements, there's going to be a lot more enforcement as well, that it's just something where maybe in the past, a lot of schools have kind of said, well, we'll deal with it if it comes up or whatnot, that we just need to think about it a little bit differently. And I think a helpful metaphor as we think about this, when the ADA came out, a number of decades ago, it had a significant impact on our built environment. And so as you walk around your campus or school districts, you'll see curb cuts in sidewalks, or you'll see ramps going into buildings, or there's our buildings now, we built them so that they're accessible by default, right? It's something that all of our facilities groups do. We just take that into consideration when we build a new building always. And it's bringing that same type of mindset to our digital assets. And there's differences certainly in that, but it's something where as we rely more and more on digital experiences, to help support students, we also need to take that same care to make sure that they're accessible and work for everyone. And just want to talk a little bit about just that there's a lot of help that's needed here. We do have there's a great committee that we get together about quarterly with people from across the state that are doing work in this area, but there's a lot of challenges. And like in higher ed, again, Utah State, we have a digital accessibility officer that does this. Not every higher ed institution has that. And so it's often somebody who's doing this as part of their role, or maybe just because they feel like it's important, but it's not resourced. K-12, again, that's where we saw most of these Office of Civil Rights complaints. I just don't think that generally there's anybody that's assigned to have this responsibility at a local level or at a statewide level. Again, UETN has done some great work here. We have some software contracts, for example, on captioning, or there's a Canvas accessibility tool that they've done some work to make those available in significantly lower prices. But during COVID, we had some funds to work with schools across the state a little bit on this. And the challenge was, even when we had money to give them for captions, for example, often there just wasn't anybody who even knew what to do with that, or how to implement that, or to even know what the problems were kind of locally. And the other thing I'll just mention here is we talk about accessibility for students with disabilities. So much of this work also just has a tremendous impact on all students. So the one example I love to highlight is captions, for example. And maybe just for a second, again, captions are on a video. It's the text at the bottom that students who are deaf or hard of hearing, they have to have that to access the video content. However, and maybe just quick raise of hands, how many of you, at least even on occasion, turn on captions when you're watching videos on Netflix or YouTube? Yeah, in most of the time, in most groups, I think we say that captions just, whether it's English language learners, you're in a noisy environment, or students who just learn better when they're reading while listening, they can just have a significant impact. And yet, while captions are available on every Netflix video, a lot of our course videos or even public marketing videos don't have those currently, which just really opens us up to a lot of risk. And so as we've talked in this committee, there's again, the opportunities for resources here. I mean, Eric brought up shared services a little bit. Huge opportunities, I think, for some of that. But the challenge is, again, that there's just no, again, Katie Garrett's done some tremendous work on this without even an official assignment. I think she just has cared about this and put some time into it. But there's no centralized resource, whether it from any statewide organization, to kind of collaborate and do this. And so the efforts that are happening are piecemeal. And again, some schools are in a place where they're not even maybe aware of the issues or are asking the questions. But then many others are, and they're trying to do this, but just feel under-resourced, alone. And there's just a huge opportunity, I think, as we think about providing some centralized resources that schools could take advantage of. Some training, or a more official kind of network of accessibility coordinators or people that are doing this work at different schools. There's a lot of policy involved with this work often, whether it's procurement policies or it's website policies. And every school is trying to do that kind of on their own right now. And legal, departments at different schools are trying to figure out the impact of these. On and on we could kind of talk, but so the question is really just, acknowledging this and looking at this. Is there a role, or what role could UETN have in supporting these types of digital accessibility initiatives across the state? I know we just had this discussion on budget, and this wasn't a part of that yet. And perhaps there's an opening still. But just would love to just pause there to get any feedback from any people on if you're hearing about this, or questions you might have, any thoughts around digital accessibility and what role UETN might play here.
Christopher, thank you for bringing this very important topic. It's something that we at USBE, so on the K-12 side, have really been concentrating on for quite a few years, and it's being led by Assistant Superintendent Leah Voorhees. And when we did our web redesign, it was actually every single item that goes up is ADA accessible. And then we had training so that every slide deck or PowerPoint that comes out of USBE is also accessible as well. We have we've done the training within USBE, and I think that's one of the things that I want to state that is time consuming, but not necessarily at a great cost, is if we're bringing this to UETN, then we need to model it from UETN first, and saying we're doing it, and the expectation is that everyone's doing it. I think that's one of the best role models. And so one of the questions that I have is, I know that we have an ADA and a accommodation statement as required by law on our website, but what efforts have we made internally as UETN first, maybe, and then we can say how do then we promote this across the state. Spencer, do you have any of that background on that?
No, I just put it succinctly. No, not a lot of background. I guess, Laura, do you have anything you'd want to add there?
Sure, Patty, it's the same goals. We try to have our website and all of the products that we put out ADA compliant. I think the challenge is the standards now are a little more rigorous, and keeping up with that, having training for the staff. There are some great tools out there that can scan your websites and walk you through ways to improve. You can have peer audits on your resources, your YouTube channel, and so on. So it is an ongoing and important part of our work.
Okay. And Christopher, to your point, how do we centralize some of these resources? If USBE is creating these resources and having these courses within where we have our administrative staff or someone that is involved or selected within each section, which we do, that make sure that it's happening and reviews, a slide deck going out or communication or a PDF or any of those things, everything is supposed to be accessible coming out from USBE. But if we're each doing that, then that's not as cost effective. If maybe we could do some even updated courses every so often. To your point, Laura, is keeping up with requirements and making sure that we're doing it. Maybe we have some of that, and maybe we already do have that as a UETN course that's being offered to update and send out information across the state, so that not everyone's having to recreate. And I'm not sure where everyone else is at, so I'd love to hear from higher ed from everyone. Sarah?
Hi, I'm not sure if this is totally the right place for this, and Kelly, jump in, but the NTIA funding opportunity seems like a great way for folks to partner. I don't know if, I think you all are familiar with that because I believe we've maybe reported out on it. But this is the National Telecommunications and Information Administration opportunity. So it's a 5-year grant. The deadline's September 23rd. We've been talking to our member healthcare sites about this grant opportunity and other sort of rural communities about it. But I think it's really exciting. It's a $5 million to $12 million grant award. There'll be about 150 to 200 awarded. And, you know, the covered populations or the priority populations include folks with disabilities and folks with other types of language barriers or other barriers to accessing digital opportunities. So I don't know, Kelly, if you want to jump in a little bit here with this, but
Sure.
it could be, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about the role of UETN, you know, some possible activities could be doing some trainings around, for example, librarians to teach patrons how to use like accessible readers and things like that. Obviously, there are many, many things that you could purchase for digital accessibility. So I think if there are specific things that are priorities that would fall under that, we definitely would want to have that conversation sooner rather than later. And Laura and I have talked a little bit, and Katie and I have talked a little bit, but it's obviously not going to solve every issue. But if there are a few key items that would be useful, I definitely I think we're open to having those conversations.
And if I can just chime in, just to give a little bit of background, Sarah, because this has not been introduced to the board because we're still working through all the information related to the grant. This is a grant that the National Telecommunications Information, I don't know what the A is for, it's with the Department of Commerce. The state, out of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunities, also pursuing funding for this. We're trying to find where UETN's fit could be in this grant. It's a really quick turnaround. And it's pretty broad. It's beyond just digital accessibility. It's digital equity. So this is tools, infrastructure, and a lot of things that could become part of this. So that's just a little bit of background on that potential grant that we're pursuing.
That might then include languages and let me ask about maybe help with some point of order within this. I know this is a discussion item, and it looks like we might be having some almost action items coming out of it, but maybe it's just maybe a discussion within here, as it's not an action item, to thoughts on having from board members of having staff continue to work on this as a grant opportunity in this area. Just thoughts on that would maybe it doesn't require a vote, but I'd like to see maybe as board members to be able to help provide that support to direct staff to continue working and seeing where that might fit within this digital accessibility initiative, who would support that unofficially as an unofficial vote. Just kind of in directing staff. Okay, two of us will.
Chair Norman, maybe we could take that as an action item to come with a proposal that the board could consider. I think this is important information. It's new for UETN. It would be a new service, if you will, that we need to consider in terms of resources and so on. And so for us, it does require some, to put a verb on it, business casing, if you will.
Yes. So, and the reason why I'm saying we can't have a vote or have it come out as an action item is because it's a discussion item, but we can direct staff to bring it forward as an action item next time.
Well, and it's also because the deadline's in September, at least for the grant.
Yeah. So Sarah, we can take that offline. I think grant or no grant, I think there's a broader question around if UETN takes up this role as a service to our partners. And so to clarify, I think we probably need to disaggregate the grant from what Dr. Phillips has presented today.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. So thank you for that additional information, and bring it back to Christopher for
just one last comment that I'd recommend, and just to get a sense of this, if you're sitting at your computer, just to get, again, if you go to it, there's a website, wave.webaim.org, that if any of you just even want to open up right now, I'll throw this in the the chat as well, to kind of just understand. I'm just going to take, if you go to this website, some of this work can be done, manually, but as was mentioned, there are some, oh dear, and if this website's never been down for me before, but let me, that's bad timing. But you can go to this site, and there's another way to do it. It'll let you put in a website like this, and there's a Chrome plugin as well. Looks like the site might be down right at the moment, but in a minute you can do this. And like here's our board member site, for example. You just click this and it'll indicate, for example, how many errors are on that site. So whatever your institution is, you can take 2 minutes and plug that in. You just kind of see, in every one of these errors, for example, represents a challenge that someone with a disability of some type might have in accessing some of that content. And I think you'll probably find, unfortunately, that across most websites of most of our institutions, there's going to be a few of these errors, and in some websites there might be over 100 errors even sometimes that we might see. And just to kind of understand how widespread the impact of this is, and also how much opportunity that I think there is for us to do a little bit better in making our content more accessible, and making sure all students know that they belong, and can have the same experiences as users without disabilities. So I'll just finish with that. But if anybody has any questions, I'm always enjoy these conversations and happy to reach out to people. Here's this website up now. You can see, you can just put your website in right there, and it'll give you that quick report. But thanks so much for the time. Appreciate the consideration.
Thank you for sharing that resource as well. Do we have any questions or comments for Christopher? All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you for always bringing it to the forefront as it should be. And I always think back in an inclusion conference that I attended, one of the things that made really good sense to me was when we help in one way, or when we provide access to everyone, or a certain group, it actually helps everyone. And your examples were spot on. And I always think of, the accessibility for wheelchairs. My father-in-law's was in a wheelchair, and that same access to have, the curb cut also helps us, transport goods inside. It also helps us like with strollers. It helps us with, so it helps everyone, even though, there was an intention to specifically help the population. It helps everyone in the community. And so just thank you for really paying special attention to that as needed. So thank you. All right, moving to our next item is 3.2 E-rate. And I don't know how many of you have been following this. I've been following it because it's been like, oh, this is, wow, we probably should talk about this as UETN. So I asked for it to be on the agenda. And Kelly, just so excited to hear from you about what this means to all of us. So Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm Kelly Cole. If anybody doesn't know who I am, and I'm over strategic initiatives for UETN, and I'm going to give an overview of some court proceedings. And I'd just like to say that I'm not an attorney before I give this presentation. I'm not offering any legal advice. I am a very informed observer of what's been happening over the last couple of years. And I participate in a lot of policy conversations nationally. So this is something that I have been following for a couple of years. So there has been a group, and I believe they've been calling themselves like Consumer Research. It's kind of a very vague name for a group that has been essentially going throughout the country and filing lawsuits targeting the constitutionality of the Universal Service Program. They've also been targeting some other industries and other areas. So there's kind of a widespread effort in a couple of areas, but I'm going to focus on the things that impact us. And Sarah asked me a great question the other day: who are the petitioners in this case? And it's a really interesting answer, is that we're not totally sure. We're not totally sure who are the individuals behind the group that is pursuing these court cases. So it's a little bit, and I even actually reached out to John Windhausen, who runs the Shelby Coalition, who's a former FCC attorney, and he had the same response, is that we don't actually know. So I feel comfortable in saying that. So what has been happening is this group has been going around various parts of the country, and they have been filing lawsuits saying that the Universal Service Program, which is the program that that a lot of providers will use to collect a service fee on your telephone bill, that broader universal service program itself is unconstitutional, and that essentially the FCC doesn't have the right to impose a tax. I would argue it's a fee, and that there are some reasons as to why that probably wouldn't be an appropriate argument, but they have been pursuing legal cases. And what has happened is that they pursued in other areas of the country these legal cases that ended up in the 6th and 11th Circuit Courts. So the circuit courts are sort of divided geographically throughout the country. So the 6th and the 11th Circuit Courts have already ruled against those petitioners and ruled that the USF is constitutional. So then the 5th Circuit Court has now ruled in a different direction, that the USF is unconstitutional. So now you have 3 circuit courts that now don't agree, and you have a 2-to-1 split on the decision. And so that has some interesting implications. What we think might happen is that the FCC might file a stay on the motion. So essentially it would kind of maintain the status quo until a greater decision is made. And so that would be probably the most logical thing that would happen in the meantime. But what I would like to focus on is that that I think that there's a reason to be positive. I think there's a reason to feel that things will work out. But in the meantime, the FCC is maintaining all of its rules and programs in effect, including E-rate, which is the E-rate and rural healthcare, which are the 2 programs that we focus on mainly through our programming. And so currently none of those rules or programs will be impacted. The FCC has not vacated the USF mechanism, and we think that the status quo will continue until something greater happens. And there is a chance of this case going to the Supreme Court, which would be a very interesting time for us if that happens. But we do want to say that the FCC seems to be upholding their position that they would pursue any legal action to protect the program. And Chairwoman Rosa Morsel has indicated that in a statement. And so we're not anticipating any major changes. The other thing that I want to note is not only are they maintaining their current programs, but they're also continuing to add to that portfolio. As we've mentioned probably in past board meetings, they are launching a new cybersecurity pilot program. They have just approved hotspot lending under the E-rate program officially for the first time. And they are just indicating that the E-rate program is a long-term priority. And so if anything were to happen, if it does go eventually to the Supreme Court, there's still quite a lot of time that would pass for a lot of decisions to be made. And so I don't think that it would have any impact for another year or 2 at least, while everything is being resolved through the court system.
That is super helpful. So is there anything that you can see, non-lawyer Kelly, but great, great, I would say Netflix series of like each series, how it played, each episode in that series. So thank you for that information. Is there anything that we can do, advocate for, or is it really just whether it's legal or not?
I think that, we have a pretty close relationship with Shelby, which is the schools, library, healthcare, and broadband coalition in DC. And they've been a really good partner in being very involved in this effort. In fact, they actually signed on as, They signed on as party to one of the lawsuits at least. So they have been very directly involved. If there is an opportunity to offer any letters of support or anything like that, I will keep an eye on that. I'm anticipating that what's going to happen, I'm anticipating that the FCC will ask for a stay to keep things status quo, and then it's going to go up through the legal system. So other than kind of some letters of support and things, but really it's kind of in the court system at this point. The other thing that I would say that we have in our favor is that the Universal Service Fund is not just a fund that funds E-rate. it also funds major telecom networks in the country. So I think that in this case, we are very aligned with industry in this funding mechanism because it supports the high cost fund that gives broadband subsidies to telecom providers. And so I don't think that there's an appetite for the Universal Service Fund to be taken out.
Thank you. Thank you. I know a lot of our schools, individual folks have reached out saying, should we be worried? And I don't know if we put out anything, because we can't put out something that says, no, don't be worried. And
yeah, I know. Yeah.
And so maybe this is just information for us to keep tracking and just let folks know what you said today, Kelly. So I really appreciate that.
And you're happy you can share this presentation as much as I know about it.
Good.
Yeah, feel free to do that.
Thank you. Jason.
Yeah, so as I've been looking at this, it seems like maybe this last court case came out after the Supreme Court's decision on the Chevron doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
And when you consider that and start looking at it from that lens, there could be repercussions that come from that.
Yes.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, it's so very true. So very true. Well, maybe we
Chair Norman,
yes.
Can I just chime in? Kelly touched on this just real briefly, but just as important as these court cases are, we're watching these closely. But the FCC, they've also announced two significant, one's a pilot, one's a decision that Kelly mentioned. One is on the MiFi devices. As you know, that was something that was allowed under CARES. This is now a permanent opportunity for E-rate in Category 2. Also, they announced the details of their cybersecurity pilot. This is what we're looking at. We haven't even had a chance to really digest it. It just came out, I think, this week, and there's a webinar next week. And you'll notice Jerome Browning's from our E-rate team is on, but that is what we believe might be a really significant opportunity. It's a 3-year pilot with a significant amount of dollars to access cybersecurity related tools and services. We're looking at it closely because it could become a permanent opportunity for cybersecurity resources under E-rate. As Greg noted, this is a top issue for all of us. And if it becomes an E-rate opportunity, that really does change the landscape around cybersecurity opportunities. It's a very quick turnaround. There's a webinar I think Jerome is hosting next week for the tech directors in the districts. If you could encourage them to participate, we want to understand what the opportunities might be at the state level. This, in a lot of ways, is not unlike what we do for broadband, that if there's some volume purchasing opportunities we can do that can benefit the state and even, not just public ed, but even higher ed, there's some tremendous opportunities there. So I really want to emphasize that. That's a big door opener for us, potentially. This is a 3-year pilot, but this is a step the FCC is taking to signal to Congress that they want to see a congressional change to allow this. So I want to really put a real heavy emphasis on that because cybersecurity is such a significant issue. So thanks, Patty.
No, that is very important for all of us to know. And Jerome, thanks for getting that message out. And I know you support a community of folks in that area to be able to get that message out. And I think it's good, maybe even, I don't know, in all of our areas, how we get it out. We can even, I don't know, Spencer, have that message at USSA if you want to talk to.
Yeah, I think this is such a short turnaround for this current cycle. What we hope is to get some big rocks identified, but to continue this conversation. It is a 3-year pilot. And so if, for example, some of the requests we made last year to the state legislature that wasn't funded, we may be able to get some funds. And it is not insignificant. It's, I think, is it $40?
40 per FTE.
Per FTE. And you do the math for a large district like Alpine School District, that's not small amounts of money. Yeah. So there's a significant amount on the table.
Well, a big thank you to you and your team, Spencer, for staying on top of this issue, informing all of us today, and then having this now as a resource, Kelly, for other people to look back so we can refer them to what was stated today. And Jerome doing that forward thinking of bringing it out to others as well across the board. Any other questions or concerns regarding this agenda item? Okay, we will move to the next agenda item, which is under reports and information. And at this time, we have the executive director report.
Okay, well, I will try to be brief because I think it's more interesting to hear from our committee, our councils. So just a couple of things to touch on. Patty, you said this at the very beginning, so thank you. It is that time of year of conferences and professional development, and that's what has kept a lot of our folks busy the last couple of months. It's sort of a summer vacation, but not a really vacation from things, but it's a way to regroup and retool a little bit for the upcoming year that is literally on our doorstep this week. So that's where our folks have been, whether it's the Tech Summit, the counselor conference, our distance ed folks. Ursa, Jason, thank you to you and your committee. Ursa is a valuable partner for UEN, and so we appreciate what Ursa is on our behalf. Just a couple other things. We touched on this in the last meeting, but we continue to work on the ARPA funding that was delayed for a couple of years, but it's now in play, if you will, for us. These are the libraries that we're working on providing expanded services and infrastructure for, primarily for wireless. We hope to come with some much deeper stories behind the numbers and the names here in the next couple of meetings, but it's been neat to engage a little more fully with the libraries with this opportunity. Of course, always the network. There's a lot of equipment moving through the downtown data center of the University of Utah right now that's going out to various parts of our network over the summer here. This is a major undertaking for our network team. And then, of course, we just awarded a contract for a study related to cybersecurity. This is funded out of our ARPA dollars. We hope this will more finely tune and inform our efforts around cybersecurity. As I just mentioned, there's the FCC grant as well as our legislative request for staffing. We hope this will better inform you as a board as to how we prioritize efforts in cybersecurity, since that's such a broad topic. And then, of course, we awarded this contract for AI tools. Just a note on this, because there's been a lot of discussion about how we go about pursuing and prioritizing software. The model for this, where we basically negotiated contracts, there's now 3 available. What we hope, and I think this is the intent of everyone using these at the district level, is for us to refine and better understand what these tools provide for our users. And we hope to glean from that what UETN's role may be in that in the future. And it may be a single vendor, it may be legislative funding or something like that. But this is really that use case process that we prefer when it comes to software, because it gives us that ability across the marketplace, if you will, in a competitive way to understand what are maybe the best tools to pursue. And then just a quick note, in case you don't follow our Utah Education Network social media folks, if you want to stay informed on what we're doing, that's probably the best way to do it. They do an incredible job putting that content out there if you're not already there with Instagram or what was Twitter. So that's just a last little plug. Our communications team, particularly Jasmine, does a great job with a lot of the content there. So just a thank you to them, because it's been a busy summer for that team. So with that is my report.
Thank you. There's a lot in that. There is a lot with all of those conferences, everything that's happening, the RFP for AI, all of those things moving forward. Any questions for our executive director?
And I will just note that I showed the screen for the Utah Education Network. There's just as good one for the telehealth network site. Sorry, Sarah, but yes, they do a busy job on that site as well.
She's like, where are we? Yeah, are we?
Yes.
Next time we'll use that as the example. Next time we'll use that as the example.
Yes.
There we go. And I agree. I love to listen to the podcasts or whatnot coming out of UEN. And it's UETN, I'll say that. They're great snippets to just learn on the way in and hear what's going on in the state to stay connected. So thank you. Right. We now have some advisory council information that's coming forward, and we have Sarah. Sarah, if I say your last name Baum or Bauman?
Oh, you're muted, Sarah.
Yeah, sorry, it's Bauman.
Bauman. Okay, so I
Yeah.
was saying totally wrong. It's Christine's name, not me. There we go. Okay, Bauman. Okay. So Sarah Bauman, and we'll start with you with the Telehealth Advisory Council, and then we'll move to Rick Gaisford for the Education Advisory Council.
All right, I'm actually going to share my screen real quick. We're real slow. Okay. Alrighty, let's see. Are you seeing it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you all for the approval of our new members. We're super excited to have Tiffany and Sammy join us. Our advisory council is really shaping up as the sort of new member of the team for UTN. I'm really grateful to have the support of the advisory council. And I just want to see if Kelly Smith is still with us to give him an opportunity to introduce himself. He is our vice chair. Kelly, can you hear us? I know you're traveling.
Yes, and I am here. Happy to be here. Very interesting discussions that I've been enjoying listening to. My name's Kelly Smith, and I am the IT director at Blue Mountain Hospital, which is down in the southeast corner of the state, down in Blanding, Utah. Been in that position since July of 2020, and looking forward to being on the advisory council and participating.
Yeah, and we were very fortunate to actually to be able to visit with Kelly yesterday. We went to Grand and San Juan counties to do our member site visits, and I'm actually gonna start this slideshow here. Okay. So Kelly, thank you, and really appreciated visiting with you yesterday. I think what's been really exciting for me and going out and actually physically being in person on site with our members is getting us a better understanding of how folks utilize our services, understanding what their true needs are within the realm of telehealth and how we can meet those needs. In listening to today's discussion, honestly, every board member meeting that I've gone to, which I know has only been a handful so far, but the discussion items are the same, right? We're talking about digital accessibility. We're talking about the electronic transfer and storage of data. We're talking about utilization of AI. I don't know, Kelly, if you want to jump in with what we talked about yesterday with how you're utilizing AI.
Yeah, I mean, we've recently brought in a new AI vendor called Athelus Scribe, and it's a tool that our providers can use. It's an ambient listening AI tool that they can turn on before their visit starts. It listens to the visit, and then at the end of the visit, they can collaborate all of the AI all of the dictation that was listened to during the visit, and it puts it into a nice formal SOAP note for the provider to add to the EMR. Again, that's Athelus Scribe. So it's ATHELAS Scribe. And it is actually, we looked at a lot of AI dictation vendors, and most of them were in the market or in the range of $300 to $400 per user per month. This one was actually only $65 per user per month, which was amazing for us to find it and to be able to find something that we can afford. You know, we're a rural hospital, and so we have very thin budgets and tight budgets, but this one has actually been very successful. It was actually cheaper than what we were paying for prior to that, which was not AI, it was just straight speech to text. So anyway, that's one piece of AI that we've added at the hospital that's been very valuable for us.
Thank you, Kelly. I think, the other thing that really came through from our visit is how many types of services you have to deliver to meet the needs of your community. We saw like the sleep study area, and folks are really having to either on site provide services that range from acute care to behavioral health, chronic disease, and in Kelly's case, this new sleep study unit, either on site or through telehealth. And the other thing that came through for me, and this was in part, from our conversation, Kelly, and then our conversations throughout the day with other folks, is that cloud-based healthcare systems really are telehealth. We were able to meet with radiologists, right, talking about how their ability to share images. We had one person that we met with who had just shared images with Huntsman in helping to address the needs of the patient. And so that transfer and storage of data via the cloud, I know you mentioned this, Kelly, just going to more cloud-based to really reduce the workload for limited staffing capacity and also just for efficiency and cost and all of that. And so as we look to further define what telehealth means for us and for our members, I think it's really important to really have that broad perspective that everything provided is really dependent on, and more as we go to sort of electronic based things, and it's dependent on that really reliable, secure, and accessible network. So it was really eye-opening for me.
Sarah, I would just add, like, I think a lot of people hear the word telehealth and they just think of, like, you know, a WebEx with a doctor. But there's such a wider spectrum than that, you know, and I think you've touched on that a little bit, but that's kind of open your mind up to what telehealth actually is. It's not just, you know, a WebEx with a provider. It's more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely still learning in this position, and it's helpful to go out and, you know, meet people face to face and really see things on the ground. So really excited to do more of that in September. We've got a bunch of visits lined up. We have 80 plus members that are healthcare, hospitals, clinics, health departments. So we're certainly not going to get to all them. My hope was to do a number of these visits before our upcoming strategic planning session in October with our advisory council members. So we're working on that. And I don't think we're going to get through all 80, but we will certainly do a number of them. And then I'm hoping to do a survey for folks to be able to bring to that October meeting, so we have more stakeholder voices in the room. The next thing, sorry, Kelly, I took a photo of, let's see if this will go down. For some reason, it's not going down. Oh, there we go. So this is at Moab Regional Hospital, myself and Mars, our IT Associate Director on UTN, Jen Sadoff, who is the CEO of Moab Regional Hospital, and Mike Foster. We wanted to show you all the Moab scene in the background for Moab Regional Hospital. We had an excellent visit with them, you know, really understood a little bit more in terms of some of the pain points that they might be having. They really expressed how much that they valued the services that UTN provides. We talked about the digital equity grant a little bit and how we might be able to partner through that grant proposal. And yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about how much I really admire and value the providers that are in these rural areas and doing amazing things for their patients and really seeking to find solutions. And I think we can be a part of those solutions by working together. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about our October 10th strategic planning session. So our advisory council members, which, you know, some of them are members on our network, others are folks that are really helping to advise and guide us as we define and develop strategies to help meet the needs. But one of the things that I'm trying to keep in mind is that the state statute for Utah Telehealth Network within UETN is to really understand the telehealth needs throughout the state and to bring that information to the governor's office and to the legislature. The only way that we can do that is really to hear from the healthcare providers themselves. And our advisory council is helping us to do that. And so they'll be meeting with us in person at EBC. And we'll be starting this process to really identify what those needs are throughout the state in the areas of access, security, technology, funding, training, staffing, all the things that you all have been talking about on the education side, really. And then what is our role in addressing those needs? We don't have unlimited capacity ourselves, but we certainly have an expertise in the area of the network, delivery of the network, obviously in USAC too, with reducing the costs. That is by, you know, one of the number one values that we bring to the rural healthcare providers. But beyond that, they really depend on our managed security staff to help problem solve. I heard that over and over again, actually, with these site visits, accolades for the staff. So kudos to the UTN staff and to the tech folks that are really responding to calls from the rural hospital IT folks to help just problem solve, and it could be, there could be an outage, but it could also be just making sure that an application is operating correctly so that they can deliver the care that they need via telehealth. So, and then we'll be establishing and prioritizing our objectives and creating some action plans. And all of that will be shared with you all along the way. I'm also, really excited to work with you on those plans and figure out, how we can be most effective and respond to the needs of our telehealth clients. So, and then I wanted to actually make a plug for the Deb LaMarche Award. So this year, we are focusing on the importance of IT development and innovative technologies and the success of telehealth programs. And so we have an ongoing call for nominations right now. There's a link there for the survey, but we can also send that put it in the meeting minutes. And hopefully if you have somebody that you would like to nominate, we'd love to receive that nomination. We're working with our advisory council members on the scoring of those, and then it will be presented at the November Rural Health Association of Utah's 2024 conference. So with that, I will stop sharing and see if there are any questions.
Sarah, I just looked at all of the work that's been done and the work of your committee as well. Telehealth has become just the connective tissue. I would say, before it was like, as stated that Kelly was saying, it's just about, doctor online. And it has morphed into just the central fabric of how people, stay healthy. And a recognition from K-12 to telehealth is the fact that that's how we get kids in school. That's how we have parents healthy enough to watch children so that they can send their other children to school. That's how we just keep kids ready to be cognitively alert. And just what foundational infrastructure you've provided with that opening up of accessibility with resources, including people and time and the different technologies that exist within that. It's amazingly just so appreciated and recognized as a foundational part to support educational pieces as well. So I just wanted to convey that to you.
Thank you. And I should say also, we are moving forward with the school-based telehealth program. We've really sort of worked through some of the tech issues with the actual kits, and we're moving forward with districts who are seeking to have provider access with their kits, and they can choose which provider they would like to utilize, and then we're making that possible through the technology itself. So just wanted to also share that because that's pretty exciting as well.
Yeah, that is exciting. And then whenever you say Deb LaMarche, it helps all of us remember her face and her energy. And so even just bringing that up and then being able to have that sort of a recognition. So have folks apply for that. Any questions or comments for Sarah? Sarah, thank you. And let that committee know they're appreciated also. So thank you.
I will. Thank you very much.
Okay, Rick.
Thank you. I will be quite brief because everything that was on our agenda for our the last time we met a week ago, you pretty much covered. So first of all, thank you to all of the board members in that for your consideration of the council changes. We will now move forward in getting the nominations from the various constituent groups for their representation, and hopefully have those in place for our October meeting, and have the new UEN Advisory Council in place at that time. So thank you for that first item. And thank you for item number 2, which we discussed, which was the proposed funding for the enterprise software. Like you as a board today had a good discussion. We also had a good discussion. We learned about all 3 of the original products that were on the from Nearpod and Kaltura and Zoom. And the council is very much in line with what your thoughts were, that these are important, and would have recommended that these requests be moved forward as well. And then we had a great presentation on the same that Christopher gave today on accessibility. and the working group there. And I think that he easily, the presentation, like I think was for you, it's always eye-opening. All of the things that we can do and we should be doing. And so the advisory council was very much in favor of doing all the things that we can to make sure that all of our resources are accessible to everyone. Of note, just from my side, I think the new National Ed Tech Plan also calls out this accessibility, particularly that of universal design for learning. If you take just those principles of universal design for learning, you will find yourself, finding ways to make sure that everything is accessible for all, and that's really, and it's really an important element. And so, those were the three major components of our meeting: the council changes, the funding request, and the accessibility working group. And so that's our report. You're as informed as we are, and and our recommendations would be what the actions that you've taken today.
Well, Rick, the board appreciates you and your committee populating the agenda for today. So great and well done. So thank you very much. Any questions for Rick? All right, thank you. We'll move forward with the next agenda item, which is about and it's an information item about the productions and events. And I don't know how many of you click on them. I would send out a challenge before every board meeting, at least click on one. One of them that I had clicked on was the UEN teacher tips. I don't know how many of you just clicked on those, but they're always like about 5 minutes. They're not very long. And this one was Rob Bentley, and it was about creating podcasts in the classroom. And they're so quick and so easily accessible mentally, like that. And they energize you for what can happen in any job, whether you're an educator or not. I would just say they're really helpful in thinking about how we use technology in our daily lives and our work, and what that means, just to stay current, so that that we're not falling behind. So just a plug for and a challenge. I've thrown down the gauntlet. At least review one of those links before you come onto one of the meetings, so that you can really get that appreciation across the board for the work that's being done at UETN. And then also we have, with that, our next meeting is on August 9th. And so make sure that's on all of your calendars and that you can attend. Jared?
I guess I need to say this. This is probably as good a time as any, but I won't be at the next meeting. This will be my last meeting. I will be retiring on September 1st. The commissioner has someone in mind to take the place there, but he's giving that some thought, and we should have somebody in place before then. What a pleasure it's been to be on this board.
I don't think that Jared followed the bylaws that said you had to get the board's permission here before you retire.
You can't just step away like that, Jared.
Yeah. Good try, though. Good try, but we're still gonna. Jared, you have just been instrumental, just across, whether it's being on UETN's board or operating in the capacity through all of the work that you've done through USHE Tech. Just instrumental, and just a stalwart figure of providing opportunities for all students and getting them engaged to the end of the row. And so Jared, I'm going to express my appreciation to you, not only as a board member, but in all of the roles you've had in keeping Utah on the map and nationally recognized in so many areas. Your contributions will be felt long-reaching after you've retired or no longer there. So thank you.
Appreciate that. It's been a great group to work with, and I will miss it.
Okay.
Dr. Norman, can I just say a word? Just because I've known Jared for many, many years, and I apologize, Jared. I was not aware you were retiring, but we will miss you. Jared has been a consistent force in a lot of the changes and revisions that have gone on in higher education governance over the years, and to have him retiring it's a little bit to take in. So Jared, good luck. I hope there's a lot of adventures on the other side of it.
Well, it made me tired. So now it's time to retire.
Well, if this were an action item, I don't know that we'd vote to approve of your retirement or not, but we would vote to approve of appreciation for you and all the work that you have done. So thank you. All right, next meeting, August 9th from 9 to 11. And
Patty, if I'll just, sorry to interrupt you, I apologize. It's actually October 11th is the next meeting, so down a little bit below on the page. And I just want to call it out, that is fall break season. I've not checked everyone's calendars. If it is something where it is a real conflict for a lot of the board members, I think we want to be cognizant of availability for that. I know as we get into October, it's always a little risky. So please let Denise know if we find we can't have a quorum, we may need to look at rescheduling.
yes, thank you. I do recognize now that I said the next meeting was August 9th, which is today. So
We'll
yes,
take it.
thank you for being so kind in your clarification. So we'll let everyone know. I think that is it. Is there anything else that I have missed out on, Spencer?
No, and I apologize for the interruptions, Patty.
No, that's the way we work. Remember when we practice this? It's like when I go astray, just jump in. So every time, just so you all know, and Christine and Jason, when you hear them jump in, it's planned because they're like, Patty's gone astray, so we got to get her back on target, just so you know. So now everyone.
Good to know. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate the time this morning.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
See ya. Take care. Thanks, Rich, for jumping on.
Okay.